Hey everyone, this is Six Path Weeb, and welcome back to the channel. Today we continue our fanfiction journey with What If Kakashi Became Naruko's Father Figure? Part 2. In this alternate story, we explore a different side of the Naruto world, one where bonds are formed in unexpected ways and a lone shinobi finds a new purpose in protecting and guiding someone who needs it the most. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits go to their respective creators and copyright holders. With that said, let's dive back into the story. 2 days later. It was early in the morning as Naruko went through her daily exercise routine. The air was fresh, and the sunlight stretched gently over the rooftops of the village. Today was a little quieter than usual. Anko had left on a mission, so she was not there to supervise training like she had been during the past few days. Naruko did not mind the break. Anko's training methods were certainly effective, but if anyone asked Naruko for her honest opinion, she might say that the training sometimes felt more like a very intense obstacle course than a lesson. Still, Naruko respected Anko and appreciated how much she had learned. Over the past few days, Naruko had noticed steady improvement. Each time she practiced, she could run a little farther, concentrate a little longer, and react a little quicker than before. That was what training was truly about. Growing stronger step by step. Her chakra control had improved a great deal. Now she could balance 5 leaves on one hand, one on each finger, and gently spin them with careful bursts of chakra. Nearby, a few of her shadow clones were practicing the same exercise on the other hand. Naruko hoped to master this skill soon so she could move on to the next challenge, tree climbing. The idea of walking straight up a tree like it was normal ground still seemed wonderfully exciting to her. Her hand-to-hand techniques had improved as well. Naruko knew she still had a long way to go before she could match experienced ninja like Anko, but she felt proud of how much progress she had made in such a short time. Anko often pointed out the small mistakes in her stance or movements, helping Naruko learn how to adjust and improve. Naruko's strength had grown too. She trained while wearing special practice weights on her arms and legs. Thanks to her remarkable healing ability, her body recovered quickly after difficult workouts, allowing her to gradually increase the weight she carried during training. Learning to use a staff had been a slower journey. Unlike running or sparring, using a weapon required a whole new set of skills. Naruko practiced patiently, spinning the staff in careful patterns while her clones watched and copied the movements. However, the subject that surprised her the most was sealing arts. Many people said it was one of the most difficult studies for a ninja, yet Naruko found it fascinating. She had already finished reading the beginner's book and had begun studying the next one. Writing the symbols carefully required patience, but Naruko was determined to practice until every line and curve was perfect. During training with Anko, Naruko had also learned a few new techniques. One allowed her to multiply the number of tools she threw, turning a single toss into a shower of many. Another involved creating a special shadow clone that could release a burst of energy when its chakra was carefully gathered together. Naruko thought this technique was very clever and enjoyed experimenting with it during practice. Her aim with kunai and shuriken had also improved. She could now hit moving practice targets with reasonable accuracy, which made her feel proud of how far she had come. There was also the matter of money. At first, Naruko had considered asking a kind shop owner she knew if she could help around the store. But she worried that working there might make things difficult for him, so she thought of another solution. Naruko created a few shadow clones who transformed themselves to look like ordinary villagers. 2 of them had already found jobs. One clone, who introduced herself as Akira, worked as a cheerful waitress at a barbecue restaurant. The other, Cayenne, worked as a helpful clerk at a grocery store. Through their work, Naruko was slowly saving some money while she continued training. Of course, Naruko knew this arrangement might not last forever. When she eventually left the village for missions, she would need to find another way to manage things. Still, she had already begun thinking of creative ideas that might help, and perhaps the sealing art she was studying would provide the answer. Finishing the last stretch of her routine, Naruko looked up at the bright morning sun. It was time to go home. Today was her final training day before being assigned a new team leader. Tomorrow would be a day of rest, and Naruko had decided she would enjoy it fully. Even someone with as much energy as she had needed time to relax and recharge. With a smile, Naruko asked her shadow clones to finish their practice and return their experiences to her. One by one they disappeared in gentle puffs of chakra, and their memories flowed back into her mind. Feeling satisfied with the morning's work, Naruko walked back toward her small apartment, ready for whatever new adventures tomorrow might bring. The next day. The next morning, Naruko woke up early as sunlight peeked through the window of her small apartment. She stretched her arms wide and smiled. It felt like the start of a brand new adventure. After washing up and getting dressed, Naruko walked into the kitchen. One of her shadow clones was standing by the stove, carefully trying to cook breakfast. Naruko had recently decided to change her eating habits. She still loved ramen very much, but she had read that if she wanted to grow strong and tall, she needed to eat a variety of healthy foods too. So now she was trying vegetables, rice, eggs, and fruit. Her clone flipped something in the pan. It landed on the counter. Naruko blinked. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "at least nothing burned this time." The clone gave an embarrassed smile and scratched the back of her head. Even if the cooking was a little clumsy, Naruko appreciated the effort. She sat down and ate the meal anyway, determined to keep her promise to eat healthier. When breakfast was finished, Naruko grabbed her cloak, locked the door behind her, and hopped lightly onto the roof of her building. From there she made her way across the rooftops toward the Hokage Tower. The morning breeze brushed against her hair as she moved quickly from roof to roof. "I can't wait," she said to herself happily. "Today I get my ninja registration and photo ID." A few minutes later, Naruko arrived at the tower and hurried inside. She pushed the door open with her usual excitement. "Good morning, Oji-san," she called cheerfully. "I brought my registration." Inside the office, the third Hokage looked up from his desk. When he saw Naruko, he smiled kindly. "Ah, Naruko," he said. "Welcome." Then he paused for a moment, noticing something different. Naruko's old bright outfit had been replaced with a more practical ninja cloak that reached down to her ankles. It gave her a calm, determined look. The Hokage nodded approvingly. "Well now," he said warmly, "that is quite a change. You look like a true shinobi." Naruko's cheeks turned slightly pink. "You really think so?" she asked. "I figured if I want to become Hokage someday, I should start looking like a proper ninja." The Hokage chuckled softly. "That is a wonderful goal to have." Naruko walked up to the desk and handed him her registration papers and photo. Then she sat down in a nearby chair while he reviewed them. After a few moments, the Hokage nodded. "Everything looks excellent," he said. "You have worked very hard." Naruko grinned proudly. Then the Hokage added, "To be honest, I half expected you to draw whiskers on your photo or make a silly face." Naruko stood up quickly. "Hey! I'm more responsible than that now," she protested. The Hokage laughed kindly. Yes. I can see that you are growing up." Naruko scratched the back of her head with a sheepish smile. "Okay. Maybe I would have done that before." The Hokage folded the papers neatly. "There is also something important I wanted to tell you," he said. "Because you helped uncover a traitor and protected an important scroll recently, I have recorded it as your first B-rank mission." Naruko's eyes widened. "Really?" The Hokage nodded. "You may come back later today to receive your mission reward." Naruko pumped her fist into the air with excitement. "That's amazing. My first B-rank mission already. I'm definitely on my way to becoming Hokage." The Hokage smiled at her enthusiasm. "I believe you will accomplish many great things." Naruko leaned forward with a playful grin. "In that case, maybe you should just give me the Hokage hat now." The Hokage laughed. "I'm afraid it doesn't work that way." Naruko giggled and made a quick hand sign. "Then how about I show you a new technique I practiced?" With a small puff of smoke, Naruko transformed into a cheerful older ninja version of herself wearing a dramatic cloak and oversized hat. She struck a heroic pose. "Ta-da!" The Hokage blinked in surprise before laughing heartily. "That is a very creative transformation," he said. "But perhaps you should save it for special occasions." Naruko turned back to normal with another puff of smoke and laughed along with him. Just then, the office door suddenly burst open. A small boy ran inside wearing a very long blue scarf that trailed behind him like a banner. "Now I've got you, old man," he announced dramatically. "I will defeat you and become Hokage." But before he reached the desk, the long scarf wrapped around his feet. The boy tripped and gently tumbled onto the floor. "Ow!" he groaned, rubbing his head. Naruko blinked. "Wow! That scarf is really long," she said. A man wearing sunglasses hurried into the room behind the boy. "Honorable grandson. Are you all right?" he asked. Naruko pointed at the scarf. "I think that might be the problem." The boy sat up and looked around until he noticed Naruko. Did you trip me? He asked suspiciously. Naruko shook her head calmly. Nope. Your scarf just got tangled. She picked up the end of it and held it out. If you shorten it a little, it might be easier to run around. The boy looked at the scarf, then at Naruko. For a moment he said nothing. Then he stood up and crossed his arms. My name is Konohamaru, he declared proudly. Naruko smiled. I'm Naruko. Konohamaru studied her carefully. You're different, he said. How so? Most people act really serious around me because of my grandpa. Naruko shrugged. Well, everyone trips sometimes, she said cheerfully. Even future Hokage. Konohamaru blinked. Then smiled. Across the room, the Hokage quietly watched the two of them with a gentle expression. Perhaps, he thought, this unexpected friendship would teach them both something valuable. Naruko waved as she headed toward the door. See you later. I've got a big future to work toward. And with that, she hurried out into the bright village morning, ready for whatever adventure would come next. Naruko sighed softly as she walked down the street, the earlier conversation with the little boy already fading from her mind. She wandered through the Hidden Leaf Village, wondering what she should do with the rest of her day. Today was supposed to be her day off, so she had promised herself she wouldn't do any training. For the first time in a long while, Naruko had free time. The blonde kunoichi scratched the back of her head thoughtfully. Since she had also decided to stop playing pranks around the village, she suddenly realized she didn't have many plans. Maybe I could visit Tenten, Naruko thought. She hadn't talked to Tenten very much, but Tenten had always been kind to her. Unlike many people in the village, she treated Naruko like any other person. Still, Tenten might be away with her teammates. Naruko kicked a small pebble down the road while thinking. Well, I could at least stop by the equipment shop. I need more kunai and explosive tags anyway. She folded her arms and muttered quietly to herself. Though I'm mostly just going to look, she said. I really need to save my money for rent. Just then, something strange caught her eye. Near a wooden fence was a piece of cloth that was clearly trying to blend in with the wood. However, it was much dirtier than the fence around it. Even stranger, the cloth was being held sideways. Naruko stopped walking. Two small hands were holding the cloth up on either side. Beneath it, a pair of feet stuck out from the bottom. At the top, a little tuft of hair poked up. Naruko blinked slowly. He can't seriously think that's going to fool me, can he? She wondered. With a small sigh, she walked over and gently grabbed the cloth, pulling it down. Behind it stood a young boy with bright eyes and a big grin. I take it you want something, Naruko said calmly. You've been following me. The boy pointed proudly at her. I'm impressed that you saw through my disguise. He announced. Your reputation is well deserved. Naruko tilted her head slightly. So that settles it. The boy continued happily. I'll be your apprentice and you'll be my trainer. Naruko blinked again. What? Yep. The boy said enthusiastically. You've got to teach me that special transformation trick you used. Naruko placed her hands on her hips. Hey, hold on a second, she said. Who said anything about me teaching you? The boy clasped his hands together and leaned forward. Please. Please say yes, boss. Naruko blinked in confusion. Boss? Yeah. You're the boss. The boy said excitedly, hopping up and down. Boss. 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 Naruko looked up at the sky and rubbed her chin. Well. She thought. I was starting to get bored anyway. She looked back at the eager boy. All right, she said at last. I can give you a few tips. But only for today. What? The boy gasped. Why only today? Naruko grinned and tapped the headband on her forehead. Because tomorrow I start my orientation as a Genin, she explained. I won't have much free time after that. The boy's eyes grew wide with amazement. Whoa. That's so cool. Naruko chuckled nervously at his excitement. Thanks. She pointed toward a nearby park. Come on. Let's go over there so we have space to practice. Before the boy could respond, Naruko bent her knees and jumped lightly onto the roof of a nearby building. Using her chakra to boost her jump was something she had practiced a lot recently. From the rooftop, she looked down with a playful smile. Try to keep up. Then she hopped to the next rooftop. The boy, whose name was Konohamaru, did not have the chakra control to jump that high, so he had to run along the streets below. Naruko made sure to stay within his sight as she traveled across the rooftops. She even took a few extra turns around the park before finally heading there. By the time Konohamaru arrived, he was breathing heavily and stumbled onto the grass. Naruko sat on a sturdy tree branch above him, swinging her legs casually. "What was that for?" Konohamaru asked between breaths. Naruko frowned slightly. "Are you in the academy?" she asked. Konohamaru tried to stand proudly, though he was still catching his breath. "Of course I am." Naruko crossed her arms. "Then why are you sitting on the ground like that?" she said gently. "Stand up." Konohamaru pouted. "I'm tired because you made me run everywhere." Naruko shrugged. "That little run wouldn't even count as my morning exercise," she said honestly. "If something like that makes you tired, you probably need more practice." She paused, suddenly remembering how many times her teacher had said similar things to her. "Huh," she thought with a smile. "I guess teaching someone does feel a little like what Iruka-sensei does." It felt strange, but also kind of nice. "Anyway," Naruko continued, hopping down from the tree. "Since you're tired, we'll start with something simple." "Hey!" Konohamaru suddenly shouted. "I am not small." Naruko placed a hand on her forehead. "I said your chakra," she explained slowly. "Chakra? I didn't say anything about your height." Konohamaru blinked. "Oh." Naruko chuckled. "I just mean that your chakra will grow stronger with practice," she said kindly. "I'll show you some exercises later that can help." She then tilted her head thoughtfully. "But first, let's see how good your transformation technique is." Konohamaru brightened immediately. "Oh. I've been practicing that." "Great," Naruko said. "Show me what you can do." The boy scratched his head. What should I transform into?" Naruko waved her hand casually. "Anyone you like," she said. "I just want to see how well you can do it." Konohamaru nodded eagerly. "You got it, boss." He quickly formed the hand sign and concentrated. Transformation Jutsu. With a small puff of smoke, Konohamaru transformed, beginning his first step toward becoming a better ninja. Naruko smiled proudly. Teaching someone new, she realized, might turn out to be a pretty fun adventure after all. Naruko sighed softly as she dropped a few coins into a vending machine and pressed the button for a soda. The machine hummed and clinked before the can rolled down into the tray. She picked it up and wondered, not for the first time, if life would be easier if every shop worked like this machine. "At least machines don't judge anyone," she muttered to herself. She shook her head quickly, brushing away the gloomy thought. Thinking like that wouldn't help her reach her dream. Turning around, she looked at her temporary student, Konohamaru. The boy had worked very hard for his first lesson, and Naruko could already see that he was getting tired. Still, he had done surprisingly well. Naruko walked over and sat down beside him on the grass. She popped open her soda can with a cheerful fizz and took a sip. "So," she said kindly, "what was going on earlier with your Oji-san? It didn't seem like the first time something like that happened." Konohamaru kicked a small pebble along the path and stared at the ground. "Oji-san named me Konohamaru after the village," he said quietly. "He said it would bring me luck." Naruko nodded and listened carefully. "But nobody ever calls me by my name," Konohamaru continued. "When people look at me, they don't see me. They only see the honorable grandson of the third Hokage." He folded his arms and huffed. "It's like I'm invisible behind my grandpa's shadow. That's why I'm going to become Hokage right now. Then everyone will know who I really am." Naruko blinked in surprise. "Ha," she thought. "He has the opposite problem from me." She understood the feeling of wanting people to see who you really were. Still, Naruko leaned back and gave a small snort. "You think becoming Hokage is that easy?" Konohamaru looked up quickly. "If it were easy, everyone in the village would be Hokage," Naruko said with a grin. "The Hokage isn't just the strongest ninja. They're also wise, kind, and always thinking about the whole village." She pointed toward the rooftops of Konoha. "The Hokage protects everyone there like their family. That takes a lot of training, hard work, and patience." Konohamaru listened closely. Naruko suddenly stood up and placed her hands on her hips with a playful smile. "And besides," she added, "if you want to be Hokage, you'll have to beat me first." Konohamaru stared at her with wide eyes. Before he could reply, a rustling sound came from the nearby trees. "I've found you." Naruko and Konohamaru looked up to see Ebisu standing on a branch above them. He jumped down and landed neatly on the ground. "Honorable grandson," Ebisu said, adjusting his sunglasses, "it is time for you to return home." Konohamaru jumped to his feet. "No way. I'm learning how to become Hokage. Don't interrupt." Naruko folded her arms and smirked a little. "Sounds like he thinks I'm a better teacher," she teased. Ebisu frowned. "Silence, Uzumaki. I will not allow you to fill my student's head with nonsense." "Hey!" Konohamaru protested. "She explains things way better than you do." Ebisu looked shocked. "Honorable grandson," he said firmly, "to become Hokage one must learn discipline, wisdom, and many advanced techniques. You don't even know a single jutsu yet." Konohamaru puffed out his cheeks. "I do too. Watch this." He quickly formed a hand sign. Transformation Jutsu. With a puff of white smoke, Konohamaru transformed into a tall, silly-looking performer wearing a bright costume covered in stars. He struck a dramatic pose like someone in a stage play. "Ta-da!" he announced proudly. Naruko blinked in surprise, then burst out laughing. Ebisu stared for a moment before adjusting his glasses again. "That is certainly creative," he admitted stiffly. "But it is not exactly a useful ninja technique." Konohamaru returned to normal with another puff of smoke and scratched his head. "Aw, I thought it looked cool." Ebisu gently grabbed Konohamaru's scarf. "Come along. You have proper lessons waiting." "No way," Konohamaru said, tugging back. "I'm learning from the boss." Naruko chuckled and stepped forward. Hey, she said. "No need to argue." Then she suddenly made a hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Puffs of smoke filled the clearing as dozens of Narukos appeared all around them. Konohamaru gasped in amazement. "Whoa." Each Naruko clone waved cheerfully. "Hi. Hello there. Nice day for training." The clones began doing silly poses and playful ninja stances, turning the clearing into a lively scene. Even Ebisu looked surprised. Naruko scratched the back of her head. "Training should be fun," she said. "That's the best way to learn." Konohamaru pumped his fist excitedly. "That's amazing." High above the village, the third Hokage watched the scene through his observing crystal ball. A gentle smile spread across his face. "Naruko seems to be doing just fine," he murmured. Back in the clearing, Naruko grinned proudly while her clones waved and cheered around her. Konohamaru looked at her with shining eyes. "Boss," he said, "teach me how to do that." Naruko glanced over at Ebisu, who was resting on the grass after a long practice session. She smiled to herself, satisfied that their training had finally come to a pause. Brushing a few strands of bright blonde hair from her face, she walked back toward Konohamaru. Konohamaru sighed loudly and dropped onto a nearby stone. "Aw man," he said, throwing his hands in the air. "I couldn't even get my teacher to fall for my trick. I want to become Hokage so badly, but I keep messing up. Why can't I do it?" Naruko folded her arms thoughtfully. She understood that feeling very well. For a moment she looked up at the blue sky, then back at Konohamaru. "Because becoming Hokage isn't easy," she said gently. "You want to reach the top right away so everyone notices you. I used to feel exactly the same way. But the truth is, becoming Hokage takes a long journey." Konohamaru blinked and listened carefully. "It takes dedication," Naruko continued. "You have to practice again and again, even on days when you feel tired. You learn new skills, strengthen your body, and train your mind to stay calm and focused. Every step teaches you something important." Konohamaru scratched his head, trying to keep up with everything she was saying. "And there's one more thing," Naruko added, looking at him seriously. Konohamaru straightened immediately. "What is it?" Naruko grinned. "There are no shortcuts to becoming Hokage." She pointed toward the training field. "If you try to take the easy way, you miss the chance to grow stronger. But when you work hard, little by little, you become the kind of ninja people trust. A Hokage protects the village and cares about everyone in it. That kind of responsibility takes patience and effort." Konohamaru's face turned red as he tried to process her words. For a moment he stood there silently. Then suddenly he turned away and crossed his arms. "Hey! Who do you think you are, giving me a big speech like that?" he said, trying to sound tough. Naruko laughed softly. "That's it," Konohamaru declared. "I won't be your student anymore. From now on we're rivals." Naruko's grin widened. That's fine with me, she said. I'm meeting my new team leader tomorrow anyway. But if we're going to be rivals, you'll have to train really hard to catch up. She stretched her arms and looked toward the afternoon sun. Well, I should get going, she said. But don't slack off. One day we'll meet again, and I expect you to have improved. Konohamaru gulped but nodded determinedly. Naruko turned and waved over her shoulder as she walked away. See you later, Konohamaru. High above the training field, the village leader watched from a window with a warm smile. Thank you, Naruko, he murmured quietly. You helped guide him toward the true path of a ninja. Some of Naruko's practice techniques. Shadow clone practice. Naruko creates helpful copies of herself so she can train in many ways at once. Kunai focus drill, a throwing exercise that improves accuracy and concentration. Clone surprise trick, a playful training strategy where a clone disappears in a puff of smoke to keep practice exciting and unpredictable. Through patience, kindness, and determination, Naruko continues working toward her dream of one day becoming Hokage, the ninja who protects and inspires the entire village. It was very early in the morning. The sun had not yet risen, and the sky was still painted in soft shades of blue and gray. But one energetic girl, Uzumaki Naruko, was already awake and preparing for an important day, her very first day as a ninja. After a quick shower and a somewhat decent breakfast of eggs and toast, Naruko felt ready to begin. She stood in front of the mirror and carefully looked herself over. Her bright blonde hair framed her cheerful face as she checked her clothing and equipment. She wanted her classmates, well, former classmates now, to see her as a capable ninja. Across her back rested her bow staff, angled slightly over her shoulder so she could reach it easily if she needed it during training. Naruko nodded to her reflection with a confident grin. Looks good, she said to herself. With that, she stepped outside and began walking toward the academy. Usually, Naruko liked hopping across rooftops. It had quickly become one of her favorite ways to travel. But today she decided to walk instead. The streets were quiet this early in the morning, and the sun was only beginning to peek over the horizon. It gave her time to think and enjoy the peaceful moment. As she turned a corner, Naruko suddenly stopped. Something strange caught her eye. Part of a fence ahead looked unusual. A sheet was hanging over it, and underneath the cloth were two small feet sticking out at the bottom, two hands at the sides, and a tuft of hair poking from the top. Naruko sighed. You'd think he would have learned after yesterday, she murmured. She walked over and gently tapped the cloth. Konohamaru, she said calmly. The sheet wiggled. Gah! You found me again. Came the muffled voice from inside. Naruko chuckled and lifted the sheet off carefully. Underneath stood Konohamaru, wearing his helmet and looking both surprised and impressed. How do you always see through my disguises? He asked. Naruko folded her arms with a playful smile. Maybe you need better disguises. Konohamaru's eyes sparkled with excitement. That's why you're my rival. Naruko laughed. Your rival, huh? I challenge you, Konohamaru declared dramatically, pointing at her. Naruko scratched the back of her head. Normally I'd accept, she said, but I can't today. I have to go to the academy to meet my Jonin teacher. Konohamaru's jaw dropped. Then his eyes filled with shining stars. That's amazing, he said. I wish I were already a ninja too. Naruko smiled kindly at him. You will be someday, she said. Just keep studying and practicing. Hard work really helps. Konohamaru nodded enthusiastically. Naruko glanced up at the sky. The sun had fully risen now. Oh wow, I better get going, she said. See you later. She waved and jogged off toward the academy, leaving Konohamaru cheering her on behind her. Naruko arrived at the academy a little later than she expected because of the small interruption. Still, the building was quiet when she reached it. She walked down the hallway and reached the classroom door just as someone inside opened it. Iruka-sensei blinked in surprise. For a moment, he didn't recognize the girl standing in front of him. Oh. Good morning, Iruka-sensei, Naruko said with her usual wide grin. Iruka blinked again. Naruko? He asked. She nodded. Iruka looked her up and down, noticing her cloak and the way she carried herself. Well, he said with a small smile, you look different. You actually look like a real shinobi now. Naruko puffed up slightly. Hey! Are you saying I didn't look like one before? She started to say. Then she paused, took a deep breath, and smiled again. I mean, Thanks, Iruka-sensei. Iruka raised an eyebrow at the quick change but simply chuckled. You're here earlier than I expected. Naruko rubbed the back of her head. Well, I was just really excited, she said. I've been waiting a whole week. Iruka laughed softly. And waiting has never been your strong point. Naruko's eyebrow twitched a little, but she quickly calmed herself. She was a ninja now, after all. Well, she said confidently, I'm getting more patient. Really? Iruka said with a teasing smile. I look forward to seeing that. Naruko's eyebrow twitched again, but she kept smiling. I have a few things to prepare, Iruka said. Why don't you go sit down? I'll be back soon. Got it, sensei. Naruko stepped inside the classroom. She looked around and decided to sit in the back right corner. It gave her a good view of the whole room. It wasn't because she wanted to hide. Not at all. She had recently read a book called Ninja Basics for Beginners, and it said that a good ninja should always observe their surroundings. From this seat, she could practice watching everything happening around her. Naruko placed her staff gently against the wall and sat down. From her bag, she pulled out a book titled Intermediate Fuinjutsu, Level 1 by a writer named Jiraiya. She began reading while waiting for the others to arrive. Students slowly trickled into the classroom. Some glanced curiously at the blonde girl reading quietly in the corner, but since Naruko kept her head buried in her book, most of them simply moved on. She turned a page thoughtfully. This training seal idea sounds useful, she murmured to herself. According to the book, some seals could help improve strength or speed during practice. Naruko imagined how helpful that would be during ninja training. I'll have to learn more about this, she said softly. Just then, a loud rumbling sound echoed down the hallway. Naruko looked up. The classroom door burst open. Two familiar girls rushed inside at the same time, both holding their hands up proudly. I win, they shouted together. Naruko blinked. Yamanaka Ino stood there with her long blonde ponytail swishing behind her. Next to her was Haruno Sakura, with her short pink hair and determined expression. Ha, Ino said. My foot crossed the doorway first. What are you talking about, Ino pig? Sakura replied. Mine was first. Naruko watched them with a puzzled look. Were they always this loud? She wondered quietly. Both girls quickly hurried toward the front of the classroom where Uchiha Sasuke sat by the window, looking calm and distant as usual. Sasuke-kun, would you like to sit with me today? Sakura asked with a hopeful smile. Sasuke continued staring out the window, saying nothing. You can't sit next to Sasuke-kun, Ino declared. Because I'm going to sit next to Sasuke-kun. She turned toward him brightly. Right, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke remained silent. Naruko glanced down at her book again, shaking her head slightly with a small smile. Today's going to be a very interesting day, she whispered. Ha! Sasuke-kun doesn't want to sit next to you, Ino pig, Sakura shouted. I'm the only one he wants to sit next to. Naruko sighed softly as she set her book down. She had been trying very hard to read, but the loud arguing nearby made it almost impossible to focus. She had only recently discovered that books could be exciting adventures filled with clever ideas, and she didn't want to give up on reading so easily. Still, the noise was too much. Naruko stood up and walked over to the two arguing girls. Excuse me, she said politely. The room became strangely quiet. Many of the students turned to look at her, surprised. Naruko was not someone they were used to hearing speak so calmly. You both realize there are two seats next to him, Naruko continued, pointing toward Sasuke's desk. One on each side. That means both of you can sit there without arguing. The class blinked in surprise. Naruko folded her arms thoughtfully, hoping they would simply solve the problem. Sakura suddenly noticed the headband on Naruko's forehead. Her eyes widened. Naruto, she started, then paused as she looked closer. Wait. Naruko? Naruko nodded. That's right. Sakura frowned. What are you doing here? This classroom is only for students who graduated. Graduated? Not for someone who failed. A few students giggled. Naruko felt a small sting in her chest, but she took a slow breath. She remembered what her teacher Iruka had told her about staying calm and believing in herself. If you look a little closer, Naruko said gently, tapping her headband, you'll see that I graduated too. Iruka-sensei gave me this headband himself. The giggles stopped. Naruko gave a small nod and walked back to her desk without another word. She picked up her book again and began reading. Behind her, many students stared in quiet surprise. Sakura blinked in confusion. She had expected Naruko to protest loudly or beg for attention the way she used to. Instead, Naruko had simply explained herself and walked away. For a moment, Sakura felt oddly puzzled. Meanwhile, one student watched Naruko carefully from across the room. Hinata. She held her hands together nervously as she looked at Naruko with a shy smile. I am glad she graduated, Hinata whispered to herself. High above the classroom, inside a quiet room in the Hokage Tower, a crystal ball floated in the air. Several skilled ninja watched the scene through it. At the center of the room stood the wise third Hokage. Beside him was a tall ninja with spiky silver hair and a relaxed posture. That was unexpected, he said thoughtfully. This was Kakashi, one of the village's strongest ninja. His single visible eye studied the image in the crystal ball carefully. So that must be Uchiha Sasuke, Kakashi said. The top student. The Hokage nodded slowly. Nearby stood another ninja with long dark hair and striking red eyes. He's the last survivor of his clan, she said quietly. Her name was Kurenai, a talented ninja who specialized in clever illusion techniques. The crystal ball shifted again, now showing Naruko sitting quietly at her desk with her book. Kakashi tilted his head slightly. Uzumaki Naruko, he murmured. The Hokage watched her with a small, thoughtful smile. Back in the classroom, Naruko continued reading, though she could feel a few curious glances coming her way. She tried to focus on the story. Still, her mind wandered. Why had Sakura's words bothered her so much today? Sakura had said unkind things before. Many students had. But today felt different. Naruko thought back to something the Hokage had recently told her, about the powerful nine-tailed fox sealed inside her. For the first time in her life, many confusing things about the villagers' behavior had started to make sense. But even so, Naruko didn't want to feel angry. She wanted to become a great ninja who protected others and brought smiles to people's faces. Thinking too much made her head feel fuzzy, so she returned to her book. A little while later, the classroom door slid open. Iruka-sensei stepped inside. He paused immediately. The room was strangely quiet. Usually, new graduates would be celebrating loudly. Instead, most of the students were whispering to each other. Iruka cleared his throat. Congratulations, everyone, he said warmly. As of today, you are no longer academy students. You are officially ninja. Several students straightened with excitement. But remember, Iruka continued, you are still beginners. Janan. This is only the first step in your journey. He lifted a clipboard. You will now be placed into teams of 3. Each team will be guided by a Jonin instructor who will train you. Students began whispering again. Naruko looked up from her book, listening carefully. She wondered who she would be teamed with. I will now announce the teams, Iruka said. One by one, he began reading the names. Finally he reached the next group. Team 7 will be Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura jumped up with a loud cheer. Iruka winced slightly before finishing. And Uzumaki Naruko. What? Sakura shouted. Naruko blinked in surprise as well. She slowly stood up. Iruka-sensei, Naruko said, scratching her cheek nervously, are you sure that's a good idea? Iruka nodded calmly. The teams were arranged to balance everyone's strengths and weaknesses, he explained. Naruko sighed and sat back down. Across the room, Sasuke remained quiet, though he looked slightly annoyed by the situation. Iruka continued announcing the other teams until every student had been assigned. When he finished, he smiled. You will meet your Jonin teachers after lunch. Until then, class dismissed. The room quickly filled with the sounds of chairs moving and students chatting as they left. Naruko remained seated for a moment, looking at her new headband. A small smile slowly appeared on her face. No matter what happened next, she had taken the first step toward her dream. She would become a great ninja someday. And maybe, along the way, she would make some real friends too. Sakura stepped out of the academy gates and shaded her eyes with her hand as she looked around the sunny training yard. Sasuke-kun? She called, hoping to spot the quiet boy with dark hair. Where did he go? I thought maybe we could have lunched together now that we're on the same team. Hey, Sakura-chan. Sakura stiffened when she heard the voice behind her. She slowly turned around and saw Naruko Uzumaki jogging toward her, bright blonde hair bouncing as she waved. Naruko stopped in front of her and gave a slightly nervous smile. Hi, Naruko said. I wanted to say something. Sakura crossed her arms, unsure what Naruko wanted. The two of them had argued earlier in class, and Sakura still felt a little embarrassed about it. What is it? Sakura asked. Naruko scratched the back of her head. I wanted to apologize for getting upset earlier, she said sincerely. I didn't mean to be rude. I think I was just nervous about being on a new team. Sakura blinked in surprise. Naruko was famous around the academy for being loud and energetic, but apologizing so calmly was new. Oh, Sakura said, her expression softening a little. Naruko brightened slightly. And I was wondering if maybe you wanted to have lunch together, Naruko continued. Since we're teammates now, I thought it might be nice if we got to know each other better. Maybe we could invite Sasuke too if we find him. Sakura hesitated for a moment. She hadn't expected Naruko to ask something so friendly. Well, Sakura said thoughtfully. I actually promised Ino I'd meet her today. But maybe another time. Naruko nodded quickly. Oh. That's okay, she said. Another day works. Sakura gave a small smile. Good luck finding Sasuke, she added before heading down the path. Naruko watched her go, then let out a quiet sigh. She wasn't upset, just thoughtful. Teamwork takes practice, she murmured to herself. After a moment, Naruko wandered over to a large tree where a tire swing hung from a sturdy branch. She sat down on the swing and gently rocked back and forth. From a small scroll in her pouch, she unsealed her lunch, a neatly packed meal she had prepared earlier. As she began eating, she looked up at the blue sky and thought about her new team. I'm going to do my best, she said quietly. One day we'll all be great ninja together. Planning big dreams already, kid? Naruko nearly dropped her chopsticks. She quickly turned around and saw Anko Mitarashi leaning against the tree trunk with a playful grin. Anko, Naruko said, startled but relieved. You surprised me. Anko laughed lightly. Sorry about that, she said. I just got back from a mission and thought I'd check in on my favorite academy graduate. Naruko smiled proudly. I'm officially a Genin now, she said. Team 7. Anko raised her eyebrows. Oh? Who's on your team? Naruko held up 3 fingers as she counted. Me, Sakura Haruno, and Sasuke Uchiha, she explained. And our teacher is Kakashi Hatake. Anko gave an impressed whistle. Well, that's quite a team, she said. Kakashi is one of the village's most skilled ninja. Naruko's eyes sparkled with curiosity. Really? She asked. What's he like? Anko shrugged playfully. Mysterious. Smart. Very talented, she said. But he also likes to teach his students important lessons in unexpected ways. Naruko leaned forward eagerly. That sounds amazing, she said. Anko laughed and ruffled Naruko's hair. You've got a lot of adventures ahead of you, she said. Just remember, being a great ninja isn't only about strength. It's about kindness, teamwork, and never giving up. Naruko grinned brightly. I won't forget, she said. Someday I'm going to become one of the greatest ninja in the village. Anko smiled at the determined young girl. With that attitude, she said, I think you just might. Naruto closed her book with a soft snap and stood up as well. The late afternoon breeze moved gently across the rooftop, rustling her bright blonde hair. For a moment she simply looked out over the village. The rooftops of Konoha glowed warmly in the sunlight, and somewhere far away a bell chimed. Except now, the energetic ninja standing there was not Naruto, the boy everyone thought they knew. She was Naruko Uzumaki, and she carried herself with a quiet determination that few people truly noticed. Sasuke had already begun walking toward the stairs without another word. Sakura hurried after him, calling his name in a hopeful tone. Naruko watched them go, then slipped her hands into her jacket pockets and followed more slowly. Another test, she murmured thoughtfully. Tests never bothered Naruko. In fact, she liked them. Tests were puzzles, and puzzles were fun. Still, something about Kakashi's words felt strange. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, Sakura and Sasuke had already left the building. The training grounds were quiet now that the other teams had gone home. Naruko stepped outside and stretched her arms high above her head. Tomorrow at 5 in the morning, huh? She imagined the training ground, tall grass, trees swaying in the wind, birds singing in the branches. It sounded less like a frightening challenge and more like an early morning adventure. Naruko smiled. I bet there's a trick to it, she said to herself. Sensei seemed like the kind of person who likes clever solutions. As she walked through the village streets, the evening lights began to flicker on in the windows. Shopkeepers were closing their doors, and the smell of dinner floated through the air. Naruko's stomach rumbled. Well, Sensei said not to eat breakfast, she said thoughtfully. But he didn't say anything about dinner. That seemed perfectly reasonable. A few minutes later she arrived at her favorite ramen stand. The friendly cook greeted her warmly, already reaching for a bowl. One miso ramen, he said cheerfully. Naruko sat on the stool and swung her legs happily. She loved this place. The steam rising from the noodles, the warm lights, the cheerful sounds, it always made her feel like everything in the world would be okay. When the bowl arrived, she placed her hands together politely. Thank you for the food. As she ate, her thoughts drifted back to her new team. Sakura was very passionate. Sasuke was very quiet. Kakashi was very mysterious. Naruko grinned. That means tomorrow will definitely be interesting. After finishing dinner, she thanked the cook again and stepped back into the evening air. The sky above Konoha had turned deep blue, and the first stars were beginning to shine. Naruko looked up at them. One day, she said softly, I'm going to become Hokage. And when that happens, everyone in the village will know they can rely on me. She imagined standing atop the Hokage monument, wind blowing through her hair while the whole village cheered. The thought filled her with excitement. But first, there was tomorrow's test. Naruko stretched once more and began walking home. I should get some sleep, she said with a determined nod. A great ninja needs lots of energy. Far away, the training ground waited quietly in the moonlight, ready for the morning challenge. And somewhere in the village, Kakashi Hatake sat reading a small orange book, wondering what kind of team he had been given. Tomorrow would be the day he found out. But Naruko already knew one thing for certain. Whatever the test was, she would face it with courage, kindness, and a big smile. Sakura looked at Sasuke with hopeful eyes. Oh. Sasuke-kun, maybe we can spend some time together, to make a plan to pass Kakashi's test, she said. Sasuke turned around and looked at her quietly for a moment. I don't need a plan to pass this test, he replied calmly. I prefer to work alone. It might be easier if everyone focuses on their own strengths. With that, he walked away across the rooftop. Sakura's shoulders sank a little as she watched him leave. Naruko, who had been sitting nearby, noticed the disappointed look on Sakura's face. Naruko folded her arms and puffed out her cheeks. Honestly, Sasuke can be so serious, she muttered to herself. For a moment she wasn't sure what to do. Part of her still liked Sakura and wanted to cheer her up. Another part of her thought Sakura might feel better after a little quiet time to think. After a second, Naruko stood up and gently tapped Sakura on the shoulder. I'm sure he didn't mean to sound so cold, Naruko said kindly. Sometimes people just don't explain themselves very well. Sakura blinked. Naruko? But Naruko had already hopped off the rooftop with a quick wave. I've got some training to do, she called as she ran off. Dash. Soon Naruko was leaping from branch to branch through the tall trees of the forest of death. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, making bright golden patterns on the ground below. She paused on a sturdy branch and looked around. I wonder where she is, Naruko said quietly. She had been searching the forest for quite a while. Just then, a small whistle cut through the air. Naruko quickly stepped to the side as something flew past and stuck into the tree trunk. A kunai? She said, surprised. More small tools zipped out from the bushes nearby. Naruko used her own kunai to knock them away before tossing it toward the source. A moment later she dashed toward the same spot, tossing several shuriken. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. She called. The spinning stars multiplied in mid-air, scattering in every direction. When they landed, Naruko blinked. Instead of a person, there was only a small pile of mud. A substitution trick. She realized. Suddenly several snakes popped out from the tree bark. Naruko sprang upward, using a burst of chakra in her legs to reach a higher branch. A whooshing sound came from behind her. Naruko turned and blocked another kunai. On the other end of the rope tied to it was a familiar figure. Naruko smiled. Do you have to greet me like this every time I come here? She asked. The woman attached to the kunai grinned mischievously. It was Anko. Of course I do, Anko said with a playful smirk. If I don't keep you sharp, you'll never improve. Naruko laughed. You just enjoy surprising me. Maybe, Anko replied. Naruko suddenly whispered a single word under her breath. Boom. Far above them, there was a loud popping sound as a harmless training tag burst into a puff of smoke, scattering leaves everywhere. Naruko peeked out from behind a nearby bush on the ground. Did it work? She wondered aloud. But before she could celebrate, a pair of gentle snakes wrapped around her middle and lifted her slightly off the ground. Not quite, Anko said from behind her. Naruko giggled as she was turned around to face her mentor. Nice try, Anko continued. But remember, after making a clever move, always stay alert. Your opponent might still be nearby. I'll remember, Naruko said. Anko let the snakes release her, and Naruko stretched her arms. So, Anko asked, how was your meeting with Kakashi? Pretty interesting, Naruko replied with a grin. He told us to meet at Training Ground 7 tomorrow at 5 in the morning. And he said we shouldn't eat breakfast. Anko raised an eyebrow. That's a curious instruction, she said. Naruko thought for a moment. Well, I'm definitely eating breakfast, she said. If the test is tough, I'll need the energy. Anko nodded approvingly. Good thinking. Naruko crossed her arms proudly. See? I think things through. Anko laughed. All right then, she said. Let's see how much thinking helps you today. Naruko grinned brightly. Bring it on. For the rest of the afternoon, the forest echoed with the sounds of energetic training. Naruko practiced her jumps, her balance, and her clever tricks while Anko guided her with challenges and advice. Though Naruko didn't manage to outsmart her teacher that day, she left the forest smiling. Tomorrow would be the real test, and Naruko was determined to do her very best. My dear YouTube family. This is all for now. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more content like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support truly helps the channel grow and keeps the journey going. Thank you for watching. Regards. 6 Path Weeb.